I'm starting to record. All right.
So go ahead, press start broadcast. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. This is Gina Bognani from Systems Planning Office, and today's webinar is on Multimodal Transportation District and Complete the Street. So before I turn it over to Maureen Gullenpan, I was going to give you a brief introduction as why we're talking about Multimodal Transportation District today. So for some of you who are familiar with Multimodal Transportation District, um, uh, may want to know why we're revisiting the methodology in the MMTD. And so I was going to give you a brief introduction. And again, for some of you who are familiar with multimodal, you know how Multimodal Transportation District was developed. In 1999, in order to manage growth and development, the growth management law was passed, and through this act, Multimodal Transportation District was developed. So the goal of the Multimodal Transportation District was to use other modes other than the auto. So again, the concept was to use multiple modes of transportation that leads to reduction of automobile and VMT. And the multimodal transportation district was developed as an exception for local governments in their comprehensive management system for areas that they could not meet concurrency. Again, not all area could have fall under multimodal transportation district. So the areas that wanted to be multimodal transportation district had to meet some criteria, and the criteria were such as they had to really be a good candidate and have a good mix of supporting land uses. They had to have good multimodal access, good transportation system in place, and have a very good interconnectivity network. So again, for some areas that they could not meet concurrency, local government could have used multimodal as an exception to give priority to bike, ped, and transit, and second to autos. So at that time, since a multimodal transportation system was developed, and Florida Department of Transportation Systems Planning Office was asked to develop a guidebook and methods for measuring performance of various modes for bike, ped, and transit. So in 2003, Systems Planning Office developed the Multimodal Transportation District and as guidebook for measuring the multimodal transportation district. So now so why are we talking about multimodal transportation district now? Why are we revisiting this handbook? Is because, as we all know, complete street policy has passed, and again, System Planning Office was asked to take a look at our existing level of service policy and to see if we can rewrite the policy or reward the policy as far as make it more context-based sensitive. So complete street it's very similar to multimodal transportation district as far as providing for all modes, all roadway users. So we figured, why not? We have this multimodal transportation methodology in place. Why not take a look at it and see where we can use and implement some of this guidance into our complete street policy. So we had Martin Gullenpan from CDM, our in-house consultant or systems planning consultant, to do a research on multimodal transportation district guidebook and tell us where we can implement the same methodology for complete street, and if they so they can come up, give us guidance and give us recommendation. So this was the brief introduction, and with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Martin Gullenpan and have him present the whole methodology in more depth.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Gina.
Thank you.
If anyone cannot hear me well or has questions, please either raise your hand or type in the chat pane and we'll address them. And before I even start, Gary, would you mind doing a quick poll and see who we've got here?
It's up, Martin. I got you.
Okay.
Can you see the screen, Martin?
No.
So it looks like about 18%
I think you're
are
going to
from.
have to close it and.
I did close it. It looks like you probably had to run it. Well, 18% are from the Florida DOT, local and regional governments, about 31%. We have 40% from consulting firms, and then 10% are the staff.
Oh, okay.
So
Thank you.
I see it, and
okay.
I see it too. Yeah.
Okay. Do the attendees, if you are an attendee and cannot see it, would you raise your hand? All right. I think everybody sees it now.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks, guys. Let's see if I've got control back here. So, some comments.
A question came in where we can find the multimodal handbook. So we'll send you a link for that handbook. Go ahead, Martin.
Okay. So we have arranged with APA, so those of you who are AICPs can get CM hours for it. Use this number to search for the event. It makes your life a lot easier. So if you're an AICP, go ahead and write down this number, and you can get your credits. And for PDH credits, we just need to, that's up to you. We send you the proof of attendance and you're in business. And we're recording this webinar, but there's no credit for listening to the recording. Here we go. So right now everyone's in muted mode. I'm the type of presenter who really prefers an interactive style, so if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt and send a question via the question tab. And for those of you who are polite and don't want to interrupt, we'll have a QA session at the end. And if you're having trouble with the chat box or whatever, you can always raise your hand and maybe one of us will figure that out. So I'll try to be brief here with the beginning because Gina did a pretty complete introduction. The one point I'd like to make here, the Multimodal Transportation District handbook methodology is built on the idea of a defined order, a defined implementation area, which makes it possible to do a lot of analysis, particularly these days with GIS, and it makes it a lot easier to do the type of detailed analysis that can determine whether or not an area really is a multimodal or a human habitat. That's the way I like to refer to it. So the brief history of concurrency, By 1990s, we started having trouble with it because local governments didn't have the funds to improve roads, and there's a whole litany. And then Gina mentioned some of the flexibility approaches to dealing with the limitations of concurrency. And multimodal transportation districts were sort of the last generation of exceptions. And now we'll get to the not as brief history. It's a non-auto mobility focus. Right out of the statute, it said primary priority is safe, comfortable, and attractive pedestrian environment, convenient interconnection to transit, and then the next bullet down, secondary priority is vehicle mobility. This is pretty big stuff in 1999. And then there was also various funding opportunities with different strategies and monitoring. This is the handbook that came out. Both of these came out in 2004, I believe, maybe the end of 2003 for the handbook. And then the companion document is the model regulations and plan amendments for multimodal transportation districts, which provide the DNA, so to speak, on how to do this. I should point out that the legislature directed FDOT to develop multimodal level of service methodologies and also to allow an area-wide level of service. And that was the genesis for this work. So coming further up in history, some of I'm going to go through an explanation a little bit about the MMTDs, but I'll use slides from existing MMTDs or the plans that were used to create them. In this case, we're showing the city of Tarpon Springs, and they started with their focal points. And based on those focal points, they decided the best ways to implement multimodal networks connecting them. Going to the text on the other side, again, that defined area. And the reason you want to get a compact area is that you want things to be walkable. Seas of parking lots make it very difficult in Florida heat and thunderstorms to go from one place to another on foot. So there are different criteria for evaluation of these multimodal districts. And the key ones are the mix of land uses, the internal and external connectivity, in addition to roadway level of service. In the slide that we're looking at, let's see if I can find my highlighter. There it is, laser pointer. The Pinellas Trail is running right through the middle. This is an example of good regional connectivity. The Pinellas Trail goes right through the center of Tarpon Springs and provides multimodal connections to cities to the north and south, so that you don't have to go out onto alternate 19 to get places. Another thing about these different criteria, the handbook provides very specific guidance on the ranges for different land uses, for residential, employment, open space. But the main point that it makes is that you need all three. including parks and open space, to create a place that people will want to walk. So you've got to have residences, jobs, housing, and schools and some of the other key land uses to make it habitable for humans without a car. Okay, so now I park my thingy here. So as part of doing the Tarpon Springs MMTD, the first thing, once they determined what the boundary of the district would be, is to do a summary of existing conditions. And this slide shows the MMTD segments for Tarpon. The multimodal district is bounded in blue, and then one of the things that's nice about this type of development is that it also the boundary was chosen to encompass the community redevelopment area as well, so they could use some of that tax increment financing to help with the actual development of this. So in doing that existing conditions summary, the pedestrian level of service was not bad on those key segments, and even the connectivity was not bad. The detriments were the auto-oriented land use with large setbacks, parking lots, and then the traffic volume on alternate 19 creates quite a barrier between different parts of the district. On the bike side, things came out a lot more dire. With the exception of the Pinellas Trail, the bicycling conditions were pretty poor, with very little good east-west connections at the time. And the same could be said with transit. At the time, the only transit was running on alternate 19, and it was for hour-long headways. But the other thing that the saving grace and what makes this a good example is that it's got a very nice grid of streets and network connectivity, so that it makes itself ripe for redevelopment and improving the other modes. Now, going back to the handbook, we'll get a little more into this, but I just wanted to point out that there are, as part of establishing a multimodal district, the idea was to also set targets or standards for the level of service for each of the different modes. And in the handbook, they give two samples of what those targets could look like. One is a more transit-oriented with better transit level of service, and the other is one that's more non-motorized oriented, that has the better bicycle level of service, but the lower transit level of service. This is just to show the idea that you can do some trade-offs, and we'll show a little later in the presentation how these can be tailored for specific facilities or zones. So moving forward, so we've got these individual modal level of service. The picture here is the future bike level of service map for tarpon. And the green and yellow are the A and B, the orange is C, and then things get worse with the E and the Fs, but with the blue and red. But there's not a whole lot of that. The area-wide quality survey brings together the land use and the transportation analyses. And the way that's done is that you define each modal network, just as you define the boundary. You define which facilities you're going to focus on and measure, and that provide the key mobility. Then you'll measure the mobility within each modal network, which is what this map is doing. And then the last piece is where you look at the ability of the population to use the facilities and to actually get where they're trying to go. One of the things here, this shows what the 2025 build-out analysis is of the MMTD. And what they did is that Tarpon used the smart code for their district. And we're going to talk a lot about different codes and contexts in the coming slides. But based on those densities and intensities within the CRA and future land use, it was determined that there'd be roughly 4,000 households, almost 8,000 population, and a little over 8,000 employees would be expected, and that it would increase 8,000 trips onto the US 19. So you have a defined area, you have a reasonable projection of what build-out's going to be. So that provides a framework to begin to, as we'll show later, how you can use that framework later to cost out what it's going to be to create this build-out. I want to talk a little bit about establishing context. In the handbook, it listed 3 examples of context. To the left, the large urban centers like Miami downtown, downtown Orlando, and the like. And then regional centers such as Miami Beach, and then the traditional town or village, maybe a DeLand or something like a Tarpon. And there are general ranges listed here that give you a sense of the mass of them. And based on that, it makes it, you're able to begin to get a picture of what context you're working with, and begin to have some yardsticks of what to expect. Ten years later, as the department moves forward with establishing the complete streets implementation, the implementation team has put together a matrix that's rather detailed, that builds off of a lot of other tools that are out there, such as the smart code, such as ITE's designing walkable urban thoroughfares, the New Jersey and Pennsylvania context-sensitive solutions handbook, things like that. And what I'm wanted to point out is just some of the key things in this, and then we'll compare how this compares with the guidance in the MMTD handbook. The first, in the context zones, the lower levels, less development are listed here, C1 through C3C, and, we're looking at natural, rural. The rural town is something that was added that's not necessarily common in all the other schemes that are out there. And then, unlike a lot of the others, the department thought there should be some of this suburban residential and commercial, because in some places that's what we've got and it's not going to change. So that's included. Before I move along, it looks at land use mix, where the buildings are placed, and it notes, it gives guidance on 50% of the parcels within a context zone. For those of you who've worked with these transects before, know that it becomes a little ambiguous sometimes when you have varying degrees of development within an area that is claimed to be one specific context classification. Off-street parking, existing uses. So I get this. So then it moves along into the more urban scenarios, the general urban residential, urban center, and urban core, which, if you recall, that's the highest density. That's the Miami and downtown Orlando's and things like that. And it provides guidance on what that mix is for retail, commercial, and here, instead of single family, it's multifamily residential. And we'll do one more slide just to show some of the other measures that are out there in their context. Put this under on else. Where you get at street connectivity. This is a big piece of the methodology, and this shows some of the measures that are used: intersection density, block perimeters, and block length. All these taken together can pretty well describe a pedestrian environment. How far out of the way someone has to walk to get from one block to another. And then there are secondary measures that are more land use oriented, with residential density, dwelling units per acre, commercial, and then employment density, etc. So they've done, I think, a rather good job of identifying a lot of the key measures to determine whether something is really how walkable or how bikeable a type of land use is. We also looked at Florida's TOD guidebook, which is designed to provide guidance as to what really is a transit supportive area. And like the other documents we talked about, there's an urban core, an urban center, and there's again different levels of intensity. And we compared how the TOD guidebook compares with some of the MMTD guidance, and it really was a pretty direct comparison. So if the MMTD guidance really applies to the more urban, and so it makes sense that the TOD guidebook would be very equivalent in terms of the type of development that's transit supportive. So the idea of establishing what context zone we're in, and then taking that, some of the criteria from the MMTD handbook would be directly applicable. In this case, we're showing the traditional town or village type of the least intense of the context, and that would probably apply to an area like Tarpon. One thing in the implementation of these is that the criteria really are targets, indicators of success, what you should plan for, as opposed to what's on the ground already. So there's some flexibility of you may or may not hit all of the targets, but it might make sense that it really is one of these different zones. And to continue kind of beating the horse here, I'm sorry, I had, if I could see your faces, I'd know whether or not I'm boring you or interesting you. But we took the DOT context zones and compared them with that MMTD handbook. So the urban center and urban core were pretty applicable to the urban center and regional center. And then that earlier figure we showed, where it laid out different, the level of service thresholds based on whether it was more transit or non-motorized oriented. That's what this column is, and it shows you. So then you get some sample targets to shoot for these different level of service thresholds or grades. And this last chart is addressing the FDOT land use context zones and the applicability to the multimodal transportation district guidance. The C2T, which is that rural town, that would be a possible traditional town or village if it had enough mass and it had the correct mix of land uses. Now these C3Rs and C3Cs, these more segregated suburban uses, as they are, would not be really applicable unless there, for the commercial, there were plans to build in residential and some of the supporting uses to keep people in that area. And the same with the suburban residential. If there was a significant commercial redevelopment going on, it could possibly also fall into that traditional town or village type of level. And then the same thing really applies for the general urban residential, the C4. If there's commercial and supporting uses added to that, then it would fit. But unless it had that mix of uses, the MMTD handbook guidance really would not be applicable to these because they're really pretty much single land uses, as they say. But the C5 and C6 would directly translate from urban center to regional center, urban core to urban center. So the focus would be, this tool would not be a tool to use for those lower levels of density and intensity, but in the higher levels, this could be a very useful tool, or it can be a very useful tool in planning how to bring one of those primarily residential or primarily commercial areas into a multimodal habitat. With all that said, going back to Tarpon, they established their goals, objectives, policies, and in their comp plan amendment. And so they set their urban and facility guidance using the SMART code, which is very similar to the DOT type of context zones. So it sets minimum densities and intensities. It specifies the complementary mix of land uses and the maximum setbacks. It discusses the building orientations of the street and goes into the multimodal on-site infrastructure, the pet amenities, all those things are specified in there. In their comp plan. So based on that, they have their, they set standards or targets, and they're based on year. So when they adopted the plan in 2007, those adopted were the existing conditions, which we saw the analysis of earlier. And then for 2015, they set some targets to shoot for. And you can see it's very different. So it looks like there's a handout with all of the links, and it's put in the handout section for people to download. That's what Gary said on the chat box. Thank you. And the main difference going out in time is to really focus on building that transit service and going up to a level of service B. I couldn't find any really recent documents to see how Tarpon fared with their last biennial report. So I don't know where they stand in relation to these standards or whether they revised them. But that shows how it all fits together. So in order to reach those standards, this is just a little piece of the list of bike ped capital improvement projects that were needed to achieve those targets. And so you list out the different projects, what it takes, and then this is another way of looking at it, where the gaps are measured on the map, and then estimated costs to fill those gaps, and there's the number they used. For transit, it was the decision was made to put together a circulator route that ran 6 days a week, 16 hours a day with 15-minute headways. And they were able to estimate the annual operating cost, and then also to increase the frequency on the alternate 19 route to two buses in an hour. And one of the really nice things about this type of scheme is that they were able to fold annual operating costs into their funding plan for the district, so that one of the things that's often difficult with transit is finding the money for operations and finding that money for a defined period of time. So that was one way of doing it. So in terms of funding this now, so you calculate the total cost of the capital improvements, determine the numbers of acres of land that are available for redevelopment, and then calculate the total number of units and floor area that can theoretically be constructed. And then based on that, calculate the trip ends. And what's not in this slide is multimodal trip ends and that whole calculation process, but that's implicit in the idea. And then calculating the cost of the trip by dividing the total cost of all the improvements and transit service by the total number of trip ends. And then you come up with a per trip cost to the proposed project. And you can call that a mobility fee or an impact fee on steroids or something to that effect. How are we doing? Any questions? Comments?
Martin, some of the questions have been already answered, but not. I don't see any other questions that are unanswered.
Okay, thank you. So one of the other features of an MMTD type arrangement is that those targets provide a good mechanism to evaluate the performance. So, and you can come up with clear answers to, is the land use mix moving in the direction of achieving the multimodal level of service standards? Because if the land use mix is improving, anyway, I don't need to get into the weeds. Most of these MMTDs have a biennial reporting system, so you can track the measures over time. And then we talked about mobility fees to fund the improvements. This illustration is from the city of Kissimmee's monitoring report from 2013, showing showing the multimodal district, and then how the transit circulator route, where they stand on the transit circulator route, for instance, and then the redevelopment districts. So in terms of next steps, if the department were to explore using this tool to evaluate the context and setting for complete street projects, some of these existing multimodal districts, which have been in place for many of them for 5-10 years, can provide a proving ground for what actually works and what doesn't. And there's room for refinement of the level of service standards for the different modes within the MMTD, and some more guidance on various planning horizons, and to some extent refinement of the level of service methodologies themselves might be something to also be explored. Some possible next steps would be updating the model regs and plan amendments document for multimodal districts. The context zones that DOT, those draft zones that we showed earlier, if that becomes formalized, then this report could be tailored to those different context zones. And then also sample level of service target scenarios could be included based on the context zone. And within the individual multimodal level of service methods and the handbook and the software art plan, transit measures would be needed for rail, bus rapid transit, etc., express bus service, things like that, as the original transit component really dates back to an era where there was very little rail in Florida. And these are some of the documents that can provide some guidance on the MMTDs and implementing it and multimodal planning in general. I should point out that that's the TOD guidebook that the Transit Office developed. They worked for many years on this project. And then two recent additions are FDOT's work with the Mobility Review Guide and the Multimodal Transportation Best Practices and Model Elements. Those two documents really provide a best practice view of where things are in the state right now. So that's what I got.
This is Gary. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. Just wanted to make clear, since you were looking at the links in the last slide. When we are through in a day or so, we will send you a summary of this session, and you will get a PDF version of the slides, which will have active links on them. So whatever Martin was talking about, you will be able to download. And the important thing to remember is something that somebody said to me once, and you'll think a lot of you will agree with me. We have enough handbooks. We just need to have the guts to follow them now. So do have the handbooks, and let's follow it up with some action. That's all.
Couldn't agree more.
I also see some hands up, and I don't know if they are if the hands are up because they have questions or would like to make a comment, which we welcome, or if they are just accidentally, which is really easy to do. Stephen, do you have a question that you would like to ask? I've unmuted you, Stephen. Stephen L. And I also have a Scott. Last name begins with the letter F. And you are unmuted if you want to speak. Does anybody else? I mean, I think they might have accidentally put those on. But if you have a comment or a question you would like to do verbally rather than in the question and answer box, I highly recommend it, especially if you have.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions in the question
Okay.
box. One
Good.
is what is the significant difference between transit-oriented development and multimodal transportation district? Marty, you want to answer that?
Sure. The MMTD is probably a little wider in scope than TOD. It could pick up areas where there's not as strong a transit component and there's more of a non-motorized component. That would be probably the main difference. Not to say that type of development wouldn't become transit-oriented development in the future. One of the things we didn't go into here was the organization of the land uses. And with the TODs, it's a pretty it's a very focused. The development is focused around the transit stop, whereas the MMTD could be a little more linear in nature, following say, something like the Pinellas Trail, or just the land, what the land use and the topography dictates. That would be my short answer. We used a lot of TOD guidance at the time in putting together the MMTD handbook.
This is Gary Sokolow, and I'd like to put my 2 cents in on this. Without getting overly legalistic, both the MMTD and the transit-oriented development seem to have sections in Florida statute written about them, so they are somewhat formalized. The Multimodal Transportation District, as Martin said previously, was really an outgrowth of the growth management concurrency system, which has been out, which is no longer applicable to state control. And the real reason that we're even having this discussion about multimodal transportation districts is that we think that even though they've gone out of favor, or not out of favor, but their usefulness was questioned after the end of concurrency, and we see that these techniques and measurements might be extremely useful in implementing the Florida DOT Smart Growth and the Florida DOT Complete Streets initiatives. So we're really moving towards that, and people want to know how we can measure things other than automobile level of service, and this is one potential answer. So, and I think Martin also said this, transportation-oriented development may be a multimodal transportation district, and a multimodal transportation district could be transit-oriented development. So it's not like they're absolutely separate.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. Though many local governments have retained transportation concurrency, and if they've retained concurrency, they've also retained their exceptions to concurrency. And so many of the multimodal transportation districts still exist in the comprehensive plans of these communities. So even though it was removed from statute as a concurrency mechanism, it was retained as a mobility and planning tool. There was another question that came in about is there a requirement to have an MMTD for a local government to have a mobility fee? And that's absolutely not the case. If a local government wants to set up a mobility fee, they as long as they follow reasonable rational nexus, they can do that. Although this is one very I'd consider it a fairly precise way of doing things.
Yes, the subject of mobility fees is probably one that could take an entire year of these webinars. This is Gary Sokolow again. I heard at least one of you have had trouble downloading the Word file that had the links in it. So I have sent a link to the handbook via the chat. So if it should work, that you can either click on the chat that I just sent out, or you can copy it and paste it into your browser window.
Copy paste just worked fine.
I'm glad to hear that.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Okay, we don't have any other comments or questions, Martin. So I want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. I hope this webinar was worth your time. And again, when it comes to complete streets, and there will be many changes. One of the changes would be to our LOS policy, and we will be making some changes as far as context sensitive to probably in our access management. When it comes to access management classification, and we want to make sure that access management classification will meet or match these context-sensitive areas. And so we will put some language in as far as level of service in our quality level of service handbook. And so yeah, we're working very hard. And again, multimodal transportation district was one option for us to look into and see how we can use this methodology from multimodal transportation district. And so with that said, I thank you all for attending, and thank you, Martin, for your presentation. You've done a great work. And so if you guys later on come up with any ideas or comments or questions, please don't hesitate to call us or email us. And with that said, I will close this webinar, and you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Gina.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.